Copyright in these lectures is either owned by the ANU or a third party who has licensed the ANU to use it. Students may use the recording for personal study only. No lecture may be communicated online, copied or shared without the prior permission of the ANU.
And we said, well, let's build, an offering for that. So we did, and I can't remember if we got 14, 16 now. We're putting on another 4. We have 4 vacancies at the moment out there, and I've got another 2 grads joining me. And it's significant growth. So in terms of dollars growth as well, I'm on 200% trajectory to be able to achieve growth by 200% in terms of revenue. And then, of course, into the next financial year, I'll be having to probably double that because we cannot keep up. So if anyone was interested, in a career in data and analytics, then definitely, PM me, or whether it's now or in a year's time or whatever it is. But there's definitely a skill shortage in that area. And it's definitely an area that we need to build and that the market really, really want. I'm going to go through some of my experiences and just a little bit of theory that we use, like it's practical theory, so what we use in industry, some of the tools and methodologies that we use, and just some of the cool stuff that we do. So I will probably talk off the cuff a little bit, but here you can see, I'll be talking a bit about empathy and how important empathy is and giving you examples of why, giving you some use cases and some things that we've done, and looking at the whole big data concept. Now, not everyone likes the concept of big data, but it definitely is something that in the business, what we call the client perspective, that big data is, how they term it and how they see it. Can anyone guess why I'm using dance themes? There's a ballerina, now there's a bit of a hip-hopper. Yeah, true, yes. You do have to enjoy your work, that's right. It's because I like to coin it dancing with data. Sometimes we're really fast-paced and it's, like a hip-hop, or it could be, something that's a rap that we're out there and it's just go, 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 come on, come on, come on, come on. And at other times it's just slow, it's delicate, it's balanced, smooth and flowing like a ballerina. And different clients want different things. And sometimes the data is really messy and haphazard, so it's like a crazy dance. And sometimes the data is in there and it's structured and it's beautiful and it flows, just like a lovely waltz. So I like to liken it to that, just because I like to ingest a bit of fun into things as well. But the team we do talk about it a lot, about dancing with data, and in the team we'll often go, well, what kind of dance is it? So you've probably heard people espouse why data is so important so much, but can anyone tell me what this is? Egyptian telegram, was it? No. Yeah. No. So it's cuneiform. It's a Phoenician cuneiform tablet. So it was the earliest form of writing. So it was a clay tablet, and they would have a little stylus like a stick, and it was actually a language which was done by points of the stick and whereabouts that they fell. It was before the Egyptian hieroglyphics. So it's the first sort of known writing to mankind. Now, in terms of data, it's got data on it, right? Yeah, but what are the constraints of it? Yeah, language issues. What else? Sorry? Clarity, yeah. What else? Think about it in today's context. Can you share it easily? There's one of them, right? You got to get a message out. You're going to have to sit there and manually copy them. What about storage? Yeah, exactly. So it's got to be stored. It's clay, right? So it can easily break. And then, if you're going to store it, it's like a library of books. You have to go and actually find it, and it's quite a difficult thing to find. It's quite volatile, and it lasts probably more for a short period of time, even though it's clay, and it's existing into today's age. In terms of durability and getting a message across, it's very slow, okay? And then you look at now with, USB sticks. I just popped the USB stick in this morning, which didn't actually work, right? Because everything I do has to be encrypted. So the work I tend to do has to have everything encrypted, everything passworded. So it makes it a bit frustrating because the ANU didn't like my encryption, which is fine. We always have a backup. Always have a backup. Snowden. Edward Snowden. Do we know the Snowden story? Yeah. So do you know that Snowden basically took that information out to the world via a USB stick? It was fast, right? It got out to the media within split seconds. All he had to do was pop it on a USB stick. He couldn't pop it on a cuneiform tablet. So the idea of that is that we've gone from this slow, haphazard, very clunky way of sharing information to something so fast. Like the digital disruption is just making it incredibly fast. Now I know I'm comparing thousands of years, but you think about yourselves in the last few years. I think it was 15 years ago that Facebook was invented. Like now, and it's a bit of my kids are like, I'm not going on Facebook, it's outdated. Like, nah, I'm not doing that. Instagram's only a few years old. So these things are happening, very, very fast. And within that context here, Adam, one of my data analysts, loves these types of diagrams where it just shows, LinkedIn here, you can see 120 new professionals, that's every minute of the day. Instagram, 49,380 photos, and that's just in terms of every minute of every day. So it's all fast-paced, it's all going in there and all this information's being collected. One thing I have to say to my kids all the time, particularly with Snapchat, is it's on a server somewhere. And they'll be like, oh, it'll be fine. They say that it gets destroyed. And I'm like, no. It's on a server somewhere. And I even had to have a conversation with one of my daughter's boyfriend's dads to say you might want to stop sending semi-nude photos because it's in a server somewhere. So, when you're a young teenager, you don't want that popping up, in 10, 15 years' time if that gets hacked. So you need to understand, you might get told these things, but they're not necessarily true. And we spoke a little bit before about privacy. You need to be really careful of what you store online. Now, in terms of the data landscape, so 12 months ago, I set up an analytics offering, and all you needed was SQL and a bit of R. Right. Now, my team need to have Python, so they've all had to upskill and go Python. We've got someone on Mathematica. We have been exploring, so we've got Cloudera, Hadoop, Splunk, and we're just starting to look now at Apache Spark. So I have a team of data analysts who came in, they know one thing. You cannot be guaranteed in 5 years' time, if they just know that one language or that one software offering, they're not going to be able to stay in the industry. You have to be continually learning and evolving. So my team are constantly looking for free online courses, constantly upgrading to the next level at university, constantly studying, constantly teaching each other. One of the fantastic things about my team is I had a PhD come in, data scientist, really good at Fortran and Mathematica, didn't know SQL. And one of the very junior analysts sat down with him for 3 days and then he was able to be like a SQL master. So you don't need all the time a formal way to do it, but you do need to be across these things. And if you do know one, you can tend to transfer to the other. But what we do find is that we're increasingly having to add to our skill sets. Now, the other day, one of the really basic languages is .NET. And I realised I had all these highly trained, fabulous professionals, but I didn't have anyone with .NET. So I was running around trying to find someone with .NET. I actually got one of my grads from here, from ANU. She's just started the grad program, but I put her on as a casual in her last year beforehand. And she goes, oh, I dabbled a bit in .NET for a uni course. And I was like, right, come in. So she came in and she actually knew more than what she thought she did. So a really big thing is that confidence. Don't say, oh, yeah, well, I've just dabbled in SQL. Just go, well, I've got basic SQL. It's probably a really good way to be able to present yourself and say, I'm willing to learn. Because the landscape is changing all the time. I can guarantee you, I stand here in 12 months' time and I'm going to be saying to you, you need some X new software that's just coming to the market. So you do need to be across. In saying that, you should probably specialise in 2 or 3 things so that for now, so that you can go in with a bit of a market edge. So you really have to think about what that would be. And we do take people without programming as well. We take data analysts. You think about data statistics, actuarial, mathematics. As long as someone's got that type of brain, then we're quite happy to look at that too. So it's definitely an area to be in. You think about a data journey, data goes through a whole heap of different points. There's entry and exit points, there's accessibility, there's the data management. Most data I come across is messy, messy, messy. And someone goes, I want to go machine learning or automation, and I go, oh my God. And my guys get in there and the girls, and we just go, oh, I can't believe they want to go AI. They do not have the data sets to do that. So we have to look at that and look at a whole number of things to do that, to improve and to be able to help them prioritise. We do like data maturity assessments to be able to say, right, well, this piece of data is going to be a bit better than this piece to move to the forward with. Security and ethics, accountability, they're all things, there's increasing regulatory compliance. The European Union seems to have it down pat a little bit. Algorithms are biased. You think about humans write algorithms. Humans are biased, whether they like it or not, unconscious or conscious. So we have to have a way to make sure that they're not. My way of dealing with that is, yes, we do have checklists and models for that, but it's also to employ a diverse team. You don't just have... and has anyone ever heard the story about I think it was the first voice-activated elevator in the 80s? That they thought it was really cool. We've got this new technology, we've got these elevators, and you can go in and you can just go 5th floor. Now, today this is a bit ancient technology, right? But go 5th floor and it would take you to the 5th floor. Tested it was fantastic. Put it in at the Hilton, it was somewhere in Europe, and a female got in. And she goes, 5th floor, and it didn't recognise. And then the guy got in and it recognised. And what had happened was someone got in with an accent that wasn't British, right? And what had happened was that it had been written, the algorithm and the mechanics behind it had been written by a male or a bunch of males in their 40s and 50s. So it recognised their type of voices. It didn't recognise younger men's voices. It didn't recognise female voices. It didn't recognise ethnic or different diversity voices. So just a really good example of why you need to be able to pull that out before you actually move forward. Bias is not a good thing. And we look at algorithm assurance and go through and try and fix that as we go. So, the accountability, and then again, security and ethics, which is high on the agenda. Now, some of you may have, those studying IT probably would have learned about people, process, technology. Who here has heard those three things? Forgotten who it was, but it was something that I studied earlier on. It was like, the three core elements of IT. You need to look at people, process, technology. And we look at that and we go, well, yes, but you also need to look at organisation, and you also need to look at data. Data is now a stream in there. And we call it the honeycomb approach. You can see it looks a bit like a honeycomb, but it is about more... There's no point in having a technology if it doesn't help the people, because it's the people that need to use it, right? It exists for the people. It doesn't exist for itself. It exists to serve the people. So then you have to look at, there's processes to be able to use it, and then obviously data flows are increasingly important in this day and age. But organisations, approval processes, cultural change, all those things need to be looked at. So what are some of the cool things we do? IDO overview, so that's the honeycomb I was just talking about. So going in and mapping and looking at an organisation and going, well, your technology might be okay, but your people aren't on board, your processes are stuffed, and you really need to look at your data flows and your approval processes, maybe from an organisational perspective, or maybe you need a project sponsor because no one's really behind this or looking at helping you with it. Insights Hub, so live dashboards where we can put in the art of the possible and have a whole heap of thinking and being able to come up, in real time, some cool ideas. Visioning, which is really about value proposition, what are we actually trying to achieve here. Customer journeys are one of my favourite, and I'll show you some customer journeys that we did at the Department of Agriculture. But customer journeys are really looking at it from the people perspective. What does the journey the person has to go through? So not just looking at, right, this technology is a HR technology and it does payroll, but going, right, I'm the person that gets paid. When I get paid, it goes into my bank. What are my expectations? If I have an issue or I want to go on maternity leave, what do I have to do? So then going back and tracking the journey of the person in their interaction with the technology. Design thinking, which is my favourite. I'm a black belt in design thinking, which is through the D School at Stanford, which SAP have an alignment with, where I did it through there. And I'm never going to get a black belt in anything else in my life. So to have a black belt in design thinking was pretty cool. And I'll give you some examples of where we've used that. Business model innovation. Anyone here done business model innovation? So business models are the way that you do business. It's the structured way that you might do it. So what we do is we go in and we try and disrupt, and we might look at how can we destroy your business, right? So for my business, in about 3 weeks' time, I've got a bunch of people coming in and going, how could we destroy Kylie? How could we destroy her offering and what she does? Why do you think they would do that? Yes, to avoid the pitfalls, yes. But possibly to look at, is there a better way of me doing the business as well? So to avoid the pitfalls, to look at all the things where I might go wrong, but to also go, actually, you should be doing it this way. So at the moment, you're growing all these people over here and help this market offering here, but maybe you should be having this market offering over here. I'll give you an example where we did that with Hyundai and Samsung, which was pretty cool. Prioritization criteria, so there's whole matrices and things to be able to work out priorities. Because like with big data, there's so many cool things you can do. Like you can do almost anything. You ask a developer, can you do this? Yep, we can do it. But prioritizing, resources, being able to see what's the thing that's going to meet the demand the most. I don't know if anyone has seen, and the girls in the room may have seen Shoes of Prey. Shoes of Prey was a business model where an Australian female with two of her friends set up this custom shoe business. It was really cool. I love them. Absolutely love them. And you went and designed your own shoe. So you could go, right, I want a red patent with a bow on, I'll have sparkles on the heel. And you're able to go in and you're able to play with it and build your own shoe. And she thought this is really cool. It's a new offering to the market. And they were doing quite well at first. But then she realised that people are busy. People actually don't want to have to sit there and design their own shoe. And the issue they had was people started to go into the website and build the shoe, and then they would go, oh, I'm not so sure. And then they would want to ask their friends, and then they just didn't want to make that commitment to actually buying it, because what if I'm wrong? What if my taste isn't that good? What if I next week want a suede heel rather than a glittery heel? Now, it might sound a bit fickle, but at the end of the day, this was a significant market offering. She had been in the media for being so successful, having a new custom product, new thing out there, a disruptor to the business, and they've now gone into liquidation. And why they have is, she said, people are too busy and they don't want to commit to that decision. So they might think it's cool and they go in there, she said, but so many people left the website and didn't actually convert to a sale. Now, I know I did, and I know some of my friends did. They were going, oh my goodness, we could have kept them in business. We should have done it. But we didn't know, that was what they were facing. But it's interesting because that's a business model. Her business model was a new offering to market, and then she found that actually the consumers want something else. They're busy, they just want the choices there and to go, yeah, I want that one. They don't actually want to build it from scratch. So a really interesting lesson for her to learn. Lean technologies. There's a concept called Six Sigma, and when we're doing process mapping, so we might go hire to retire. So we hire someone, and at the end, hopefully they stay with us until they retire. And there's all these different points in the journey, right, in HR. So we might map all those different points out. But then what we do is we say, and we're doing this at the moment with the tax office, with one of their programs, is going in and going, so at what point can we actually make this more efficient? And it's called lean. And if you look up lean methodologies are pretty cool. And they go in there and try and look at to create those efficiencies. Toyota introduced it to try and have the manufacturing line be able to be more streamlined, so they could automate it more and have multiple people working on the product, and also have the robotics integrated with the people. And you'll notice in the robotics and a lot of those manufacturing lines, there's still always a person around checking, making sure things are okay. So even though there's automation, there's still a role for the people in that. It's just a different role. And then the IDEO roadmap. So a lot of organisations want to know where they're going to go, where they're going to be in the future, 5, 10, 15 years' time. So just outlining for them what that might look like through business model disruption, through looking at design thinking, through just lean techniques, whatever it is, building a roadmap for where that might look like. If you build a roadmap for 5 years' time in today's world, do you think in 5 years' time it would be achieved and look like you built it? No, it wouldn't. Things change so fast, it has to be living and breathing. Plans in the old days used to be sort of strategic plans, maybe 5 years' time, 10 years' time. Now we have to start looking at 2 or 3 years' time or even less. So one of the most important things is the human-centric approach. You need to start with the business problem. What if? I have so many people coming to me in Department of Education, or one recently, who said, we've got these great data sets. We get all the NAPLAN results from the children and we can go back in and we can look at which principal might be performing based on the results of the children. We can work out whether, you know, a particular teacher has been off, you know, and then a new teacher comes back in or whatever based on these NAPLAN results. We collect all this data. It's really rich, and yes, it is. Yes, it's a bit controversial. NAPLAN data is a bit controversial. But they said, what can we do with it? We want to go AI. I said, okay, what do you want to do in terms of AI? I don't know, you give us a solution. And I was like, well, you've got great data sets, but that you don't know your vision, you don't know where you want to go. Like, what are you going to do? So sometimes people have these really good data sets and they go, that's really cool. We know they're more mature than most. We know they've got all the governance. We know they're great. And they go, we want to go next level, but they have no idea. The problem is, it's not how you do it. What you do is go, what is our business problem? How do we retain the attention of children in the classroom? Should be our business problem. Then what data sets have we got that can help us do that? So the first thing is to actually look at what do we want to solve. Not we've got great data sets and what can we do with them, but what are the things we're trying to achieve. So how many children do we want to get to 90% TER or more? That's a business problem, right? So how can we actually do that? Work out steps on how we might approach that and then look at the data. So to not be data driven, but to be business problem or issues oriented first. Then you map the data and you map the technology later. It's quite frustrating in a lot of meetings I go into, and they just want to jump into, well, what could SAP do? What could IBM do? And it's like, no. What is your business problem? What are we trying to solve? That is what we need to be focusing on. Exploring and immersing yourself. You can see some pictures there. When you're doing this, in the explore phase, you need to immerse yourself. You need to go out there. So if you're doing it, get out there into industry, whatever it is you're exploring. I remember a particular example was South Australian Power Networks, and they were telling me that new iPads had been released and that no one was using them out in the field. And I was like, oh, okay. So what do you think the problem is? They go, we don't know. We've just spent all this money on these new iPads. And I said, can I go out in the field? And they went, yeah, okay. So I put on the hard hat, I thought it was pretty cool. Got a pink one. Put on the work boots, put on the high visi. Went out there. I took one look at a guy hanging off a pole. And I went, I know exactly why they're not using the iPads. A, he had big, thick safety gloves on, right? Because he's touching electricity wires. He's out there, even if they're not live, it's a tough environment. They're difficult to deal with. And he was hanging sort of precariously off, a number of ropes and things. And I was like, how is he going to put information into an iPad? Like, it's not going to happen. He's going to come back down and then he's going to be busy, because then I looked at his schedule. He had to then go to the next job and then the next job. He didn't have time to get back down and fill in the data. So we started looking at goggles, safety goggles that could actually read and collect information as well as audio. And then we came up with something that probably doesn't sound that cool, but it worked for them, which was massive pieces on the arm. So a bit like a Fitbit, but like really big. Because these guys have, and they tend to be guys, but they tend to have big fat fingers. They're out there in the freezing cold, in difficult conditions, and their hands just get quite big from the elements. And then they've got gloves on top of that. So we needed to have something where gloves, and big fingers could actually go in there and enter the data. So we did have that as well, so they could do that out in the field. I would have had no idea to do that, except I went out in the field. Right, so going out in the field and watching what's going on is so important. You may have seen this if you've done the design thinking, the brainstorm and affinity analysis. So I do this nearly all the time for almost any problem. In fact, I was getting frustrated the other day because I wanted my kids' school to do it with an issue that's arisen. I don't think they really knew what was going on. But you get collaboration, you get all the ideas in the room. We could get everyone in this room to be able to start thinking about, a particular problem. And you all come from different backgrounds, you all have diverse thinking, and you could come up with some really cool stuff if you put the power of group thinking into the problem. So that's what we like to do, and the affinity analysis is how we drill down into the themes. And then we create and prototype, and I'll show you some examples of that. Prototyping is basically putting together what it might look and feel like. The next step would be minimal viable prototyping, where you might actually go to a digital machine and do something, but sometimes it's a matter of just a whiteboard, or I probably should have put some pictures, but even little cutouts of people. A key thing we have to do is get people to tap into the other side of their brain. So most people I work with are analytical, most people I work with are mathematical, most people I work with are really good at fingers and numbers and statistics, and then I have to get them to go and think about how we might solve children's attention span in the classroom. There's a big jump there, in terms of what they have to do. So we get them to tap into the other side of their brain. And we do the Play-Doh and we do the Lego. And you should see, particularly people in their sort of 40s, more reserved in suits, high level, sitting in a room, and I bring out the Play-Doh. You should see their face. They're like, oh my God, what is she on? And I explain that I'm a scientist. I explain the science behind left brain, right brain thinking, and they get that. Now, left brain, right brain thinking is debatable, in academic circles. But in a simplified version in industry, it's what works. So what gets the executives to the table to pick up the Play-Doh. They do not pick it up until I say, pick up that piece of Play-Doh, right? They'll leave it there. They won't touch it until I go, pick it up, please. So they have to pick it up, open it up. I have to talk to them like they're children. Get it out, right? Now I want you to create a little man or a little, dog or something. And they're looking at me. Once they get it out and do that, they don't leave it alone. They love it. And then they're all fighting over who gets to take it home. So it's a really important way of getting them to start, changing their thinking. We have a concept of purple people, which aligns with this as well. So our red people are technical and analytical, and our blue people are business and communication. What we strive for at Deloitte is to try and get people who are a mix. There will always be people who are technical and analytical, red, and always people who will be blue, but we do need people to be able to merge and to be a bit of both. So I have had to learn so much in terms of the red side of things. I'm naturally more the blue side, but I look after a team of data scientists and data analysts. I have to do QA on their statistics. I have to know this stuff. I have to learn it. I have to stretch. So don't let me hear anyone in this room go, oh yes, but I'm not good at creative thinking. Or, I'm not someone that's good at dealing with stakeholders because I'm an introvert. If you want to be successful, you have, and you can see it's a bit blurry, you don't have to be fully purple, right? You can still be a bit on the blue and still be a bit on the red, but you do need to have the skill sets of both if you want to move forward and be highly successful. Okay? And they're the type of people we want in the room as well, a mixture of purple, blue and red. So these are actual pictures from workshops I've run. The top left there is Osgrid, and Osgrid were looking at the Chinese were coming in to potentially buy Osgrid, who are a utility company based in Sydney in New South Wales. And what they wanted to do was looking at improving a number of their processes and the things that they do in their innovation. So they said, let's set up an innovation hub. And we said, well, what will that innovation hub look like? They wanted to get it ready for the Chinese buyers to come in and go, wow, that's really cool. Look at the things they're doing. And it has sort of been a bit all over the place. And they wanted to bring it in and really display it. So we ran a number of workshops there about how might we have an innovation hub that is useful, that is affordable, and that the buyers potentially will get excited about, and want to possibly give even more money to buy it. So we worked really closely with them, and we came up with pretty cool innovation centre where everyone was able to feed in their ideas, and we were able to have a criteria and a process. And so a lot of this was looking at the charter and the processes and the criteria. Over here is one I ran in Germany with Koreans. So I worked with a number of Korean companies, LG, Samsung, Hyundai, a company called Amol Pacific. Does anyone know Amol Pacific? Some of the girls tend to know it's a makeup brand, and a distribution company as well. And we went in there with a number of ideas. So in Korea, it's very structured. They like things to be very much, we start at this process and we follow all the processes through in working with the Korean culture. So we took them out of Korea and took them to Germany and went to Waldorf. And then we exposed them to a whole heap of different ideas. And I'll show you what some of those might be. But you can see there in the background, if you look closely, it's actually part of what we call, it's a customer journey in the business model map, which is one of the tools we talked about. So we've got, a bunch of people in there working through and talking through what some of the solutions might be. In the bottom corner there, the people in uniform are from Border Force. Looking at, there's a big issue at Border Force in terms of people out on the boats that are picking up refugees, right? There's a lot of overtime that's required in that area, and I can't go into too much detail, but essentially that could be out there for 24 to 36 hours without sleep. And they're probably exposed to fairly traumatic conditions. They don't want to be picking up refugees out of the water. They want these people to be safe. They want to, and they're out there at the coalface. There's a lot of political pressure on them as well. So we're looking at some of the HR processes, in particular about the time and compensation and what we could do to be able to assist them, and PTSD and a number of other things as well. Because, they might sign up to go and be Border Force because it seems cool to be in the uniform, and then suddenly they're finding themselves having to deal with some mum who's just lost her child overboard, and they don't want to be in that situation. They want to help, but there's certain parameters and things that they have to have as well. So going in there and just helping them work through that, through design thinking. And the one down the bottom there you can see was more of an IT one, so an IT implementation. What are the challenges? And you can see the challenges with single source, being able to get things from one single point of truth. Collaboration, the ease of use, automation, there was a challenge in there, timeliness and accuracy, and governance. So they were things that they'd all individually put up there, and then we were going through and prioritising which ones should we tackle first. There's rules and techniques we use, generally about being respectful, and there's a number of different techniques in there. And what I usually do when I show people when we're doing design thinking is which ones we're actually doing and explaining them. You don't do all of them at once. So we use a lot of empathy. So anyone here used empathy, design thinking? Yes. Yep, good. Okay, good. It's really important. I've had people go and give me a workshop agenda and it's got no empathy, and they go, it's design thinking. And I'm like, no. It's always got to have an empathy element, and you have to explain why. And if you're not aware of them, I tend to use the one of the incubators in India and Nepal, what they've come up with. If you're not sure of that, go and Google it and have a look at it, or I can send it. Or the MRI machine. The MRI machine goes down quite well as well. But just giving them a context. This is one that I particularly use. So you can see down the bottom here where we're looking at a client, and it was, what does success look like to them if we get this right? And that was near the end. So we were going through each of them. The personas, you can see the investigator out in the field, the call centre operator, the person compiling a report, the legal team, the secretary of the department. So that's the equivalent to the CEO of the government department. And so we got them to go through each of those. But then what we do is rotate them. So you might have a big empathy map, and it says Joe Blow, and then there'll be Mary, and then there'll be Frank, and then Stan, and then what we do is you have 2 or 3 people in front of one, and then we go, okay, so you've done Stan, now you're doing Mary. And they'll go, oh, but I don't know anything about Mary, I'm not legal. And the whole point of empathy is that you're putting yourself in her shoes. So you know something about legal, everyone knows something about legal, and if you don't know about it, then you need to sit there and listen and have a look at what other people put up there so you do understand a bit more about what they do. So yes, you do need those experts in the room that relate to that persona, but you don't always need that. You need to be able to have people learning what that persona might be thinking, feeling, breathing, seeing, doing, even if you've got absolutely no idea what a legal person does. It gives you a better understanding. We use tools. My favourite tool is Industry Swap. Has anyone here used Industry Swap? No, I love this tool. We get them to get out of their thinking. You're in a government department, or you're with Samsung, and you go, I want you to now pretend you're not Samsung anymore. McDonald's have just bought Samsung, right? And everything has to be done the McDonald's way. So we get them to do all the attributes of McDonald's. So when we think about McDonald's, what do we think about in the room? Come on, tell me. Think about McDonald's. What do we think? Fast? Sorry? Yeah, food, burgers. What else? Come on, speak up. Happiness? I like that. Loving it. What about their processes and the way they do business?
Lots of workers, like cheap.
Yeah, lots of workers, cheap labour. Yeah. Sorry? Yes, yes. Yes. Start thinking too about, now digital. You go in and you order off the screens. You don't order from people. It's automated. The training systems and the procedures manuals and everything has to be done the McDonald's way. You go into a McDonald's and you expect it to be very similar. So when I walk into a McDonald's in Singapore, it's got 2 or 3 different menu items, but it's pretty similar to when I walk into one in Italy or walk into one in Australia. Okay, it's sort of a very similar business model. So what we do then is we say, okay, Samsung, now pretend you're McDonald's. And they have to then have that thinking and go, okay, so what is the training like? What does it look like when we first walk in? How do we get happiness? Right? They start looking at all those attributes and start applying that. And it gets them out of that thinking that we're Samsung and we do things this way. It's like, for a moment, now pretend. It works really well with federal government departments, particularly IKEA is a good one to use. You think of IKEA, it's a massive warehouse. It's very clear. There's arrows about where you need to go. Everything's boxed up. It's all self-service. It's very... the design is, people like it. It's very simple. It's cheap. So you start thinking of those things, and then if you took that, to Samsung and say, right, now do things the IKEA way. And you find that you get a really different approach. Every single time I do this, I get new ideas, and I get viable, good ideas that they would never have thought of before. So I absolutely love this tool. It's my favourite. Again, it's another one where probably more executives in their 40s and 50s look at me like, oh my God, what is she on? Again, like McDonald's have just bought us, hello. And you warm them up and they get into it and they're like, that was the best thing of the 2 days, I loved it. So it's always the thing that goes down well. Here's a prototype for Hospital of the Future. So one of the concepts we had to come up with and we worked with when I was at SAP was, what does the Hospital of the Future look like? So instead of saying, how can we improve services, how can we improve record keeping, there are a whole number of things that they were doing, but what they wanted to do was actually build some new hospitals. And the University of Canberra was one that we looked at as well. And it was about, how can we have a hospital of the future? So everyone thought about what a hospital of the future would look like. Now what was really interesting was that this here is a prototype that was drawn about the record keeping. So one of the biggest issues is when you go from an empathy perspective as a patient, that you have to fill in forms and you're really sick. And it's not a good time to be filling in forms, and then you get changed from ward to ward and you fill in more forms, and then they come in and they got your name wrong, and they still have those boards at the bottom of your bed, which with, a whiteboard marker, because they just don't have it digitised. So, there's hospitals out there, particularly in Europe and places like that, that they do have that. One of the biggest issues that we've gone into with hospitals is data and transferring of data and data flows. It's a massive issue. But we said, no, let's look at Hospital of the Future and let's just look at it overall. It was pretty fascinating. It was pretty horrible because we did storytelling. So we got people to come in and tell us their experience. Someone who's lost, their father had come in, had particularly bad cancer, had his chest cut out and then steel rods placed in the front of his chest, had an arm amputated, and he had been gone in, thought it was procedural, knew that he was going to have these things amputated. Was a bit scared anyway, because most of us in a hospital are not, bright and chirpy and happy. We're in there for a not very good reason. And then they operated on him, and then they didn't tell the family where he was. They said he's likely to be in this ward, and they went there and they waited and waited and waited, and he wasn't there. And they thought he might be in ICU. And then someone said, oh no, he's in HSU, and they're like, what is that? HDU, sorry. What is that? And apparently there's a difference between ICU, which is intensive, the care unit, and then there's high dependency unit. I still don't even quite know the difference. I think HDU comes before ICU. And so it was, frustrating for the family. They couldn't find him. So they knew he'd finished, but they couldn't find him. And then when they found him, they didn't know who the next of kin was. Right, so there's just all these issues going on. And so we explored these stories. And we ended up coming up with something you would not believe, which when I was at Canberra Hospital the other day, I wish they had, which was wayfinding. One of the things that people wanted fixed more than anything else, so not the health services, not the doctors coming in, not the quality of care, being able to find their way around a hospital, right? So they came up with a concept which is being used at one of the hospitals in the US at the moment, which was essentially having a Google Maps type feature of the hospital layout, which I think the ANU could benefit from in finding buildings, on a wristwatch, or on something similar to a Fitbit. And you're just able to go in there, and then they looked at, well, we could actually put that on a phone and just have an app on the phone to be able to find your way around. It's a bit similar to Google Maps, but around the hospital. And, that was one thing that came out of it. Another thing that came out of it was improving the record system, which here is the prototype for being able to do that. But the other thing that was really interesting to me was about the meals. So people keep coming around and having to fill in paper forms for their meals and what they want, but half the time they're a bit sick and they don't really know, and hospital food's not the best anyway. So what they were able to do was get that digitised. And I don't know if any of you have seen the news, but if you haven't, go and Google it, Deloitte Assist. Deloitte Assist is something that we came up with where people who are in hospital, who are bedridden, who cannot communicate easily, are able to communicate via voice, so they don't have to touch anything, so they don't necessarily have to be able to have use of their arms, and can say, nurse, can you please come? Or nurse, I'd like a drink of water. And it just captures it, sends a message to the nurse that has prioritisation criteria, and then the nurse or the doctor can then go and attend to their needs. They don't need to press a buzzer, because not everyone can do that, and half the time you lose your buzzer. That was one of the other things. You have this buzzer and it gets caught between the bed and then falls on the floor. We were looking at all these empathy side of things. So if you look at Deloitte Assist, you'll see that that's something that's come out of this particular research, which is pretty cool and won a lot of awards. And it's simply voice activated, saying what you want back to the nurse's station. Really simple idea, but it came out of initially going, how do we improve the record keeping, which we were able to do as well through this prototype. You can see prototypes don't have to be fabulous or fancy, it's simply a drawing with lots of scribbles all over it. And I'm sure my time is coming up soon. So this is a customer journey. Department of Agriculture, for every animal, sounds awful, but for every animal that gets killed, a certain amount of money goes back to the government, so that if there's a disease outbreak or issues in terms of drought or any of those things, where the government can actually help industry. So it's like a tax or a levy. And what we did was mapped what the actual process was from a human perspective. I drew this drawing. One of the cool things I said to you before was learn to do different things. I'd never drawn anything in my life about 3 or 4 years ago. Now I've learned to be a visual facilitator, and it really got home the message to them there. So you can see we went through, it's like a process: identify the need, develop a proposal, consult, refine, submit. If the submit doesn't work, go back to develop the proposal in a circle, up to assess, and then a draft levy instrument, which is essentially getting it through government to pass. So this idea was having a new levy, so particularly walnuts, looking at having a levy because they don't have one now, and they wanted one in case there's a disease outbreak for walnuts. So each industry gets to choose to opt in to do this or not. So just a different way of looking at it. Collaboration in innovation. So while I was working in Korea, I was doing, they have innovation centres in Samsung and Hyundai, and I was working with a number of other companies, and we put them all in the room together. And some people said to us, why are you doing that? Like completely different industries and potentially have some crossover and competitiveness. And we said, well, we just want to get some diversity thinking and some collaboration as well. So we were looking at business models, and Hyundai was looking at a business model, and Hyundai really pride themselves on affordable cars. They're not into the super fancy, schmancy, U-Butte car. They're really into about the affordable car that most people can drive. And Samsung, obviously, really about the phones and what they can do there, but they're also looking at insurance. They offer insurance as well, particularly in Korea. And they could not come up with ideas on their business model. They were doing destroy your business, they were doing all these things, and we're pushing them, and they actually happened to be next to each other. So I was facilitating both groups, and they were sort of next to each other trying to do this, and they started talking to each other and getting to know each other. And then I said, let's go issues-led. What's something that's an issue in Korea? And they went, wow, one of the biggest issues is the Korean government doesn't collect crash data. So Hyundai was saying it's really frustrating because we don't really know where the black spots are. So here in Australia, every time you have a crash or something, you've got to report it to the police, or the insurance company, you report it back to the police, and we know where the hot spots or the zones are, so we know where to then go in and fix the roads. And we don't always do a great job of it, but we do have the data. And the Korean government didn't have the data. So they were discussing this with Samsung, and Samsung said, well, nearly everyone in Korea has a Samsung phone because people tend to be quite loyal. Not everyone has one, but nearly everyone. Why can we collaborate? And they went, yeah, well, let's look at it. So let's look at this business problem and see if we can collaborate. So before Hyundai had been looking at doing sensors, dashboard things, and they suddenly went, well, everyone has a phone, so why don't we just have the phone where it goes into like a charging spot, but actually can collect the data on the car. So how many hard brakes it has, whether you think it had a crash or not, could all be registered via the phone. So they actually got that up and running, and then they said, but how do we make money out of it? And then they worked out the Korean government really wanted this product, so they would probably buy it. Now, it's very unusual to come up with a business model where the government will buy something from you, because before they were looking at how can we get customers to buy things from us. And so they took this back to the Korean government, and guess what? They bought it. They went, we don't have any crash data, we'll buy 12 months of your data. So they set it up, and they set up all these incentives. So if you bought a Hyundai or had a Hyundai, you got extra incentives if you've had a Samsung phone as well. So there was an incentive for Samsung to get people to buy a Samsung phone, and there was an incentive for people to buy Hyundai because then you're helping add to the safety of the roads in Korea. So it was a win-win. They did not come up with that idea, and they wouldn't have come up with it themselves. They had to collaborate, and it wasn't something they naturally went in there to do. They went back to Korea and were like, wow, we got this idea, and it worked. Because one of the biggest things too is how do we make money from it? How do we monetize it? And when we did say that the Korean government would buy it, everyone looked at us like we were a bit crazy at first, but it worked. I'll just flick through these. So you can see with the honeycomb we had before, each breaks down. So the technology here breaks down into various components that we look at. You can see our top 5 tips. Leverage what you've got, talk business when asking for budget, thoroughly research capabilities, collect data with a digital end goal in mind, and create an environment to experiment in. So, a very collaborative, open environment where you can have crazy ideas. There's always the vendor landscape. Then, of course, there's all the technology landscapes within there, and it's growing. There's things in there that are you saw the one I presented earlier, the landscape is ever changing. And lastly, I often get, because I work in data and analytics, but our data looks like this. And it's siloed, there's no data owners, it's a bit messy, there's no asset registers or catalogues, it's difficult to obtain insights. So I can't name them, but you would not believe how many organisations come to me and they go, investigators out in the field, and they'll go, we can't get an insight into whether it's men that do this or women that do this, or whether it's more children, or whether it's people of this age group or that age group. And sometimes you think, really? I really think you should know that. And they don't. They're just not mature enough yet. So that's why it's a growing field, because more people want data insights than ever before. There's big data, they don't know where to start, and it's a significant challenge for them. Again, as I said before, the biggest thing we say to them is start with the business problem, form the hypothesis, and then see if you can align the data with that hypothesis and how that might work. We have a number of feasibility tests that we use, and you would learn them in design thinking, like the NUF test. Someone know the NUF test? I get everyone to apply this in their work as well if they can, to kill an idea on the spot if you need to. Is it new? It doesn't have to be completely new, radical idea, but is it new to you and what you're doing? Is it useful? Is it actually useful? Right? Can it actually solve something, fix something, be useful? And is it feasible? So that's obviously from the budget perspective or the viability perspective on, doable. So a quick NUF test. You just quickly calculate a score out of 10. You have a look, new, useful, feasible. If it's not, kill it. Okay? It's just a really quick little idea to do on the spot. And of course, then you go down into more detailed, analysis and looking at things to be able to align to what you need to do. But it's just, I like it because it's a quick killer. And it's good in business meetings if someone's got a new idea to just quickly run it through your head. I mean, don't kill it on the spot in front of someone if they've come up with an idea they think is cool, but maybe start exploring it and going, oh, is it new? And that's a really good tool to have, particularly when dealing with executives. And just here, My people love being let loose on the data, right? They just love it. So I keep saying to business, let them loose on it, let them play with it. Most of the people that work in my team do other things. So I've got one of the grads that's starting. She's writing a program for. She's a gamer and she's writing like a whole new game, and then she's making a virtual reality game, and she does that in her spare time. I go to one of my team, Arif's house, and he's got all the computers all set up around the room, and he's got the virtual reality headsets, and he's written various programs and adapted things, and I have a few hackers in the cyber team as well, penetration testers who've got some really cool stuff that they've done. And not everyone's like that. We do have a mix, but let them loose on the data is what I keep saying to business. Like, just let them play with it. Let them come up with something. So it's giving people a bit of latitude as well. And as an example, those of you that are doing mechatronics, we had a robot that we bought. I decided my team were a bit bored, a bit of downtime. We were in between projects, so I bought them a robot. And the robot was like one of those $1,000 ones that you just buy. It's all pre